A beautiful day in Suffolk, Martin.
It is, it's gorgeous, isn't it? Absolutely gorgeous.
So we're into the Sundays after Trinity now, and we've got this passage from Mark 3, chapter 20 to the end of that chapter. Lots of different themes arising in that. What occurs for you from it?
So first of all, we're back in Mark, aren't we? And of course, where you end up when you pick up the lectionary, where you end up depends on the date. So we land in the middle, or towards the end, in fact, of chapter 3. And I suppose that the whole passage is framed by an incident with Jesus' family at the beginning and an incident with Jesus' family at the end. And then there's this contention with the scribes who are accusing Jesus of being in league with Beelzebub. And then you've got this extraordinary parable of the binding of the strong man, which I know you will want to reflect on. And I suppose where I mean, there are lots of big themes in here, and you've got the sin against the Holy Spirit, and what on earth does that mean? I suppose where I am, first of all, is just recognizing why has Mark presented these events in this particular way, and particularly why has he framed them with this story about these stories about Jesus' family. So in the first one, Jesus' family think that he's mad, and in the end, the second one, at the end of the passage, they're outside presumably this place where Jesus was teaching, wanting to get in. So they are portrayed as outsiders, having in the first scene portrayed Jesus as the outsider because he's the one that's mad. And so you've got a sense that this is, if you think about the community Mark is writing for, this is about trying to determine some of the kind of who's in, who's out. What does it mean to be inside rather than outside? And the contention with the scribes is all part of that. And you can imagine, well, first of all, I think one would have to say that it would be very hard to imagine the early church making up tensions with Jesus's family, however they were manifest. So there must be something. There must have been some issue there, and there are various conjectures about whether that was because Jesus' family became very significant in the early years of the Jerusalem church, and Jesus' brother was more on the subscribing to the Torah version of living the Christian way, and there were all the tensions we know from Acts between those two directions. So maybe that, but that feels like a lot of conjecture. Perhaps more helpfully, you've got the recognition that in Mark's own community, families would have been split and separated over their faith. And so here there was some sense of, I'm not sure what sort of comfort, but maybe some sense of comfort that this was an experience that came even for Jesus in his own family. But then more importantly is this redefinition of who's in. Suddenly, a family is a defined group, however, whoever's in it, a defined group by virtue of blood, or by virtue of particular relationships.
Yeah.
Whereas Jesus is saying, actually, this is open to everybody, and what you are to do is to follow in the way. But anybody can do that. Anybody will be included in that family. And partly, I think, why the term family is so resonant in church life, as much as it's problematic as well. So that's a bit of a waffle, but it's a difficult passage, I think, and that's where I've ended up. But you focused on the binding of the strong man.
Yeah, so Jesus says no one can enter a strong man's property and plunder his goods unless he first of all binds the strong man. Then indeed he can plunder his property. And Jesus is already using language here, or perhaps Mark in writing it up as using language here, to help us to decode what Jesus is saying. So, for instance, plunder his goods. The word for goods is the same word used at Mark 11:16 for the accoutrements in the temple itself. Yeah. So, who is the strong man that is being plundered here? Well, a number of commentators, and I think I go with them on this, are suggesting that the strong man is actually the whole priestly establishment and the scribes and the Pharisees. So that the house, if you like, is the temple, and the goods are the vessels of the temple, and Jesus is the stronger one who's coming and plundering their goods. But I mean, you kind of think, really? Plundering their goods? What does that look like? I'll come back to that in a minute. But, how does he bind the strong man? Because later on we find the word bound used about John the Baptist, who's bound, Jesus, who's bound, even Barabbas is bound. Well, the next thing Jesus talks about is he says people's sins are forgiven them. Yeah? But those who blaspheme against the Holy Spirit are not forgiven. Yeah? Now, so what's a way in which he's binding the strong man? He's announcing the forgiveness of sins. The whole debt system, from which there was profiteering of the temple establishment and the scribes and the Pharisees, depended on a very elaborate method of forgiving of sins. And so what you could see as being the unforgivable sin is that refusal to allow the good news which liberated people from being liberating to them. But instead, there was the ongoing burdening of people and the denial of the good news to them. So, taking that all as a piece, it seems to me that this is a disclosure of what Jesus is up to here. And he's, putting himself at odds with the existing religious authorities as they are. Again, like you then got this idea about the family, and who are my family now? Those who do the will of my Father in heaven. They are my brothers and sisters and my mother. And that's quite chastising to us in a way, isn't it? Because, who are our kin? I remember talking to somebody in Bradford who converted from Islam to Christianity, and she was decrying the fact that, church talks about family, but I've given up my family, my whole extended family, in order to convert to Christ. Yeah. And Sunday church going and singing loud hymns is not quite family.
Yes, yes.
And that, I think, is a standing rebuke to us. What does it look like for us genuinely to be more kin than we actually tend to be in our consumer way of being?
Yeah.
So but I think for me the main thrust is that kind of like, binding of the strong man and a coded disclosure by Jesus of what he's about here, and how forgiveness of sins is right at the heart of that disclosure.
So without elaborating too much, the other interpretation of the strong man is Satan, because he's just had this challenge that he's on the side of Satan and Beelzebul, and talks about the kingdom, the house divided against itself, and then tells this story as well. So another way of looking at it is to say Jesus is the one who comes in and binds Satan and plunders his goods, which would take us down another track. So
Yeah. Yeah.
thank you.
Thank
More to
you.
think about.